The first House bill is 5257 by Representative Williams, and this is an act relating to property, Rhode Island Fair Housing Practices Act, and it prohibits discrimination in housing against those persons who have lawful source of income.
Yes.
Yes, sure. Welcome, Chairwoman Williams.
Thank you, Madam Chair, Madam Vice Chair. At this time, I want to say a few words prior to going into the logistics of the intent, the work, the blood, sweat, and tears of this bill. It's on its 5th year. It's been on a long, hard road. It has traveled miles and top of miles and top of miles. Discrimination of any kind should not be condoned, should not be encouraged, should not at all exist. But I understand that it takes all kinds of things to make this world go round. As we all know, we have problems in every corner of this world. In the state of Rhode Island, we have a huge problem with the lack of affordable housing. And when I say affordable housing, understand that I am saying low-income housing, because gentrification in the state of Rhode Island has become a priority for the privileged individuals. It's been a money-making for those individuals, while at the same time our low-income families have been displaced because the rents have been too high to meet what is being asked. And then those that are homeless have an even harder time securing any type of safe, sanitary, suitable, and affordable living quarters. We have the responsibility to change those things, and we must. If nothing else, with this pandemic, with all of the incidents that has happened last year with George Floyd, opening up the windows, putting the floodlights on reality, if nothing else, we must accept the fact that change is upon us. Change not only in housing, but in many other things, but I'll stick to housing here tonight. So I am before my colleagues, asking each and every one of you that this 5-year travel has not just been mine, but it has been a travel for many of your own constituents. Maybe many that you don't even know exist, but they're there. This is not a Providence issue. This is not a Pawtucket issue or a Central Falls issue. This is a Rhode Island issue. And we as elected officials in the state of Rhode Island, we have a duty to do something about it and to do the right thing, because we can and we must. 5257 has a slew of individuals that will be, and welcomed, will be testifying and speaking truth. They're going to bring to you some real situations, enlighten you. Not that they have not brought it here before many of you, not all of you. But more so now that a lot more people are what is being said or called, they're woke. They're paying attention. They're going to bring the experiences and facts to this committee, to the viewers, about what has transpired, the hardship, the discrimination that they have faced, the reality that people of color is faced. And let me also add, when you hear about source of income, people automatically go to Section 8. And when you go to Section 8, you always look and think black. Let's have a grown-up conversation here today. See? Everybody that is qualified for Section 8 does not necessarily look like me. Nor any other real source of income. It's only poor people that have it. There is a coalition of more than 41 organizations that have been walking side by side with me for these last 5 years. And that number has grown. And I am happy and honored that they have been there for the many reasons, of some of which they will share with you tonight. There is approximately 28 individuals that will share their stories about the effects that this bill has had on their lives. You see, I'm one of those individuals. I came from Section 8 housing to the State House. So let me tell you, this in no way is a reflection of who you are, having a subsidy of any sort, or having an income that is not 6 figures. Section 8 house to the State House, that's me. This act would prohibit discrimination in housing against those persons who have a lawful source of income. Not selling drugs, ain't panhandling, ain't got a little hustle going on. It's about a lawful source of income. The term lawful source of income means being the recipient of federal, state, local, public assistance, including medical assistance, excuse me, the recipient of having an income that is lawful. You earned it, you have it, you can prove it, you can make your ends meet. You could pay that rent. So there is absolutely no reason for anyone to be discriminated against, and especially because they are on some sort of fixed income or a subsidy of called the Section 8 or voucher. Many people have gotten these vouchers and have had to turn them back in because they have not been able to secure a place to live. As soon as the landlord, in many instances, hears that you have a subsidy, some are as bold as when they advertise having the apartment available for rent, post Section 8, not accepted. Some are bold enough to tell it to your face if you go in there and you don't have a Section 8, but you have a lawful source of income. They will say to you, can't rent to you. This practice of racism, this practice of discrimination, this practice of saltiness, this unfairness needs to stop. Year number 5, but it's been going on for more than 50 years. How long is too long for us to do the right thing? People, poor people, people of color want to be able to live in a safe, sanitary, and affordable, decent place. We have everybody on board, those that had issues with this bill. And the time has come where we cross over the crossroads of change and say once and for all, we're going to do the right thing. Now, surely there's going to be 900 new ways of skinning a cat. Even when and if this bill passes. Because racism comes in all shapes and sizes. So this may not deter, but trust me, it is a start for change. It is a start to assure people that they can go and make sure that they are able to get fair housing even with the voucher. So please note, a source of income, Section 8 vouchers, is not a black thing. It's a qualified individual thing. It's a helpful thing. And we need to look at it as such. And not look at it as those people. Because it's anyone who qualifies. So with that, Madam Vice Chair, I will step back and ask the floor to be open for all who are here to testify and are holding on call to testify. And I thank all of you. If I didn't know that there were so many people that are here to express their desires and their experience and their story, I would be bold enough to say, let's move this and take a vote right now tonight. But I'll let you take the charge. And I thank you very much for the opportunity of being able to express my opinion on this piece of legislation whose day is here upon us. And I thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, Chairwoman Williams. Appreciate that. I'm going to turn it back to the chair.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Very nicely put and very necessary. For the people who are listening or who are calling in, the testimony that Chairwoman Williams just gave was compelling. please understand that we have a lot of people who are going to call. We want to get to everyone. We will not shut anybody off. But Representative Williams said it right. So please, with that said, and we do not want to be insulting to anybody that's out there, that limit your testimony as I turn it back over to the first vice chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, Representative Morgan.
Chairwoman Williams, I just have a question. I absolutely agree with the purpose of this bill. But I'm aware that some landlords will do credit checks on people who are wanting to rent their apartments. And if the credit score is very, very low, or if they find out that that person has left a previous apartment without paying their rent for several months, or has been a disruptive tenant, or, you know, has left an apartment damaged, very damaged, that they don't want to rent to them. And it's not because it's Section 8, it's because they have, that renter has a history of not paying their rent, of leaving a place damaged. So would that landlord be caught up in this? Because it's not because it's Section 8, it's not because of that, that's where the money is coming from. It's because the tenant themselves, the individual, has a history of abusing their apartments.
Thank you for the question. First and foremost, you're not going to have a bad credit score based on a landlord creating a bad bio about you. Your credit score may be, when they do a credit check, may be low because you couldn't afford to pay your student loan because you're only making less than $15 an hour. So if the landlord chooses to check your credit score and it's low, the landlord, with any type of business sense, should have a conversation with that potential tenant and ask them why it's that. And he should not, or she should not, utilize a low score as a reason not to rent. Now, on the other part where you said this person has been going through apartments without paying rents repeatedly, after the first couple of times, if it occurred, that individual would not have a third or fourth chance, because that landlord would get that information just as you are describing it from the report.
But would that person be
the
eligible?
landlord and the landlords, there are many unscrupulous landlords that make up stuff on individuals because they got caught trying to hustle the tenants. So we have to be cognizant of there's more than that one side to a story when it comes to landlords and tenants.
Yeah, no, I'm aware of that. I've just, if a tenant has a history of not paying their rent and the landlord turns them down, but they have a Section 8 voucher, does that landlord get into trouble with this bill? Because, I mean, I think landlords should, it's not a charity. Giving apartments is not a charity. And if the landlord is taking steps to protect themselves, not because it's Section 8 voucher, but because the person, that individual, has a history, would they get caught up in this? Would they be, charged with discrimination under your charge bill? I mean, there has to be a way for somebody, a landlord who is just trying to protect their property and their income, to not be caught up in a bill that says, well, you're discriminating against this person, because they're not discriminating against the voucher. They're discriminating, or they're they're not discriminating at all. They're just saying you as a person haven't been paying your rent you have a history of it.
As I said previously, and you did slip with the truth, they're not discriminating against the voucher, they're discriminating against the individual. I'll let you slide, I'm giving you a pass on that
It's
one.
not discrimination if
But-
they're trying to protect their property from somebody who has a history of not paying their rent or has a history of leaving apartments damaged.
Individuals who have a history of not paying their rents, trust me, will not be repeatedly getting apartments to rent. If it happened once and then someone gives them a chance a second time and they do the same thing, you can rest assured they are not getting a third bite at the apple, and especially if they look like me. So I'm telling you, frankly, the landlord has enough power. If they are a business person, they know how to handle their business. But realistically, many landlords refuse to do the repairs on many of their properties, which the voucher, the Section 8 by law mandate that it needs to be safe, sanitary, and suitable living conditions. And many of them refuse to bring it up to par. And that's also a reason that they will refuse to take the voucher. It may only be $500 worth of repair, but they refuse. But in most instances, because a voucher, you can travel to these cities and towns, and we have 39 cities and towns. About 35 of those cities and towns are refusing to accept vouchers or Section 8 recipients, and especially if they show up and they look like me. That's a fact.
I just want to ask one more question as a follow-up,
We
Chairman.
will hold off on that.
Well, this is the question.
I don't think you heard
If a
me.
person has a history
I don't
of
think
not
you heard me, Ms.
paying,
Morgan. I don't
do
think
they
you-
get a Section 8?
I
Because
don't-
if this
I
is
don't
saying if
think
they
you
get a
heard
Section
me.
8, if they get a Section 8
I
voucher, you
don't
have to give
think
an
you heard me.
apartment. So
I
if they
said,
have a history of
hang
it, do they
on.
get a Section 8 voucher?
Hang on, Ms. Morgan. And this is not going to go back and forth. You said what you had to say. You said what you had to say. We are now going to the calls to listen to people. We will come back to you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, so we have a lot of written testimony, but we'll start with the calls. So I do believe that we have Mayor Alorso, excuse me. Mayor Alorso. It's not written down. He came and whispered it in my ear, so. Okay, Mayor, you are with us at the House Municipal Government and Housing Committee. You have the floor, so please continue.
Great. Well, thank you. Thank you, Chairperson, and thank you to the committee for hearing my testimony. I come before you today to express my strong support for House Bill 5257, the Rhode Island Fair Housing Practices Act. We all believe that no one should be denied access to safe, accessible, and affordable housing. And unfortunately, what we have is a situation where folks who are housing voucher holders are stigmatized. There is indeed a stigma around it where many landlords simply refuse to rent apartments to people who have housing vouchers. And what ends up happening is that it only constricts the kinds of housing opportunities and the kinds of options that low-income residents have, folks who are using these housing vouchers. And what that ends up doing, it ends up funneling them more and more towards lower income neighborhoods and concentrates poverty even further, making sure that folks who do have housing vouchers end up in even worse situations because of it. Now, we know that what we and the advocates are asking for on this This is a bill that's been passed by every one of the New England states except for Rhode Island and New Hampshire. They've adopted source of income as part of their non-discrimination laws. In addition to that, 63 cities and counties and municipalities have enacted something like this at the local level, including cities that are as diverse as Los Angeles, Iowa City, New York City, Spokane, and others throughout. Here in Rhode Island, Providence is looking to become the next city to join that list. Our ordinance, which would do exactly what the state statute would do, is scheduled for final passage on February 18th, and I do hope it passes so I could sign it immediately into law. However, with municipal policies in place, this is a law that needs to be enacted at the state level in order to support as many families as possible. And as you all know, as much as we love our neighborhoods and we love our cities, we live in such a small state where people travel and they move from one city to the next fairly freely, and we should have a uniform set of protections for them wherever it is that they're searching for a home. Because of that, I strongly urge this committee to support this bill and help ensure that Rhode Island families are no longer unfairly denied access to safe and affordable housing because of their source of income, that they're not confined to narrower and narrower housing searches, and are given the opportunity to participate in our full communities just as everyone else. Thank you so much for your consideration.
Thank you, Mayor Alonso. Is there anybody who has any questions for Mayor Alonso? No? Hearing none? All right. Thank you again, Mayor. And we will move on to the next person, and I believe it is Lori Pisacata. I'm sorry, I'm not doing well with that name. She's from the MH Association of Rhode Island. Lori, are you on the line?
Yes, I am. Good evening. Thank you so much for this opportunity. My name is Lori Marie Pichota, and I'm the Executive Director of the Mental Health Association of Rhode Island, and I'm so happy to see this important legislation. You may be wondering why a mental health advocacy organization is testifying tonight. I'm here because stable, safe housing is the foundation of everything good in our lives. First, I want to make the point that according to the Substance Abuse Mental Health Services Administration, which is a federal agency, the 4 pillars of recovery are home, community, health, and having a sense of purpose in one's life. Second, you probably associate housing vouchers with people of low income, and that's certainly true. But it's also important to remember that many people with disabilities who live on SSI or SSDI benefits also receive housing vouchers, including Section 8. So I'm talking about people with intellectual developmental disabilities, physical disabilities, and people with serious persistent mental illness. I am sure you can imagine how nearly impossible it must be to find affordable housing when living on fixed disability benefits. Housing vouchers are critically important to people with disabilities. I lived in Massachusetts for 10 years, where I served as a case manager for adults living with HIV/AIDS. In Massachusetts, as you know, they have laws prohibiting landlords from discriminating against lawful sources of income. Without this law, case managers would never have housed any of our HIV-positive clients because most of our clients lived on disability benefits and received housing vouchers. These individuals would have most certainly ended up living on the streets, not staying in medical care, not taking their antiretroviral medications every day. It's also worth noting that in Massachusetts, landlords could and did evict bad tenants. There is due process for tenants, of course, but landlords have rights just as tenants should have rights. To answer the question from Representative Fogarty, there are reasons why someone could lose their Section 8 voucher permanently, and these include things like criminal activity, drug-related criminal activity, not paying rent on time for a number of months, and not keeping utilities like gas, heat, electricity, and water on in the apartment. I've heard concerns that if landlords can't discriminate against people with housing vouchers, then they might get stuck in perpetuity with bad tenants without any power to evict them. It's a false choice. We don't have to choose between stopping discrimination or forcing landlords to keep bad tenants. We can protect both parties. I submit to you, this committee can protect Rhode Islanders from discrimination, and it can also protect landlords from getting stuck with bad tenants. Where there's a will, there's a way. That's what I always say. This legislation is so important to people who live with disabilities. It doesn't cost the state anything to pass this legislation. It's literally the very least the state of Rhode Island could do to help people who live with disabilities. And it might even save the state money in the long run if we have fewer people doubling up with relatives, living on the streets, cycling in and out of emergency room departments, in and out of hospitals, prison, and shelters. I'm hereby volunteering myself and my organization to work with this committee to achieve a legislative solution that is agreeable to landlords and people with disabilities. I am at your service. Take me up on this offer. In closing, I respectfully urge this committee to pass this important legislation. Passing this legislation sends the message that Rhode Island does not tolerate discrimination against people with disabilities. Thank you for your time this evening. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much. I've got to remember to turn on the mic. And thank you for volunteering your services. We appreciate that, and we may take you up on it. And I just wanted to make clarification, because I think you did answer a question for one of the other representatives. First off, let me ask, does anybody in the room have a question for Lori? No? So you said that a person could lose their housing if they have criminal activity, not paying for how many months, did you say? Is there a certain number of months?
I don't know a specific number. The states might have some influence over that. Also, often when you are working with a case management agency, there are rules in place with those agencies as well. So they might even be more stringent about what would cause someone to lose a local housing voucher or an agency-related housing voucher. Section 8, people don't want to lose Section 8 vouchers. There's a big incentive to hold on to your Section 8 voucher because
Sure.
it's a 10-year waiting list.
Oh, wow.
And if you lose your voucher, if you're lucky, you'll go back to the bottom of the waiting list for another 10 years, but you could also lose it permanently. So, yeah, not paying rent on time, not keeping your utilities like water and gas and electricity on in your unit, and criminal activities could cause you to lose your housing voucher.
Okay.
It just
great.
depends on the particular voucher.
Okay, well, that answered some questions. Again, are there any other questions for Lori? No, hearing none. Thank you so much for your testimony. We appreciate that, Lori. Next up, we have a Katie Grandowski, if she is available. Katie, are you on the line?
I am on the line, thank you.
Katie, welcome to the House Municipal Government and Housing Committee. You have the floor, so take it away.
Thank you very much. And thank you, Chairman Hall and members of the committee for taking my testimony. My name is Katie Grandowski. I'm a voter, a small property owner, and a Section 8 landlord here in Providence. And I'm asking you to support Bill 5257 to prohibit discrimination in housing based on a person's lawful source of income. This ordinance will help ensure that tenants with lawful sources of income have an equal opportunity to find a safe and decent rental home. It will also help extend the reach and the impact of one of Rhode Island's most valuable housing programs, the Rhode Island Housing Section 8 Voucher Program. As a landlord who participates in this program, I can testify to its value from an owner's perspective. Participating in this program has helped us find and maintain reliable, high-quality tenants. The Housing Choice Voucher Program, for us, has been a stable, reliable source of income, particularly through the pandemic. It's been a really key part of helping us maintain financial stability. Rhode Island Housing has been a responsive partner, and they've actively helped to keep our building in compliance and have worked with us to remediate issues like lead paint in our building. And I just, primarily wanted to testify to say that we have not been adversely impacted in any way by our participation in this program. We've not found compliance with Rhode Island Housing to be invasive or onerous, and participation in the program has allowed us to more effectively find high-quality tenants maintain our property, and increase our investment in the neighborhood. 15 states and Washington, D.C., plus 99 counties and municipalities have enacted laws prohibiting discrimination based on source of income, including Massachusetts, Connecticut, Maine, and Vermont. Our own city of Providence enacted a local ordinance that would protect residents when looking to rent an apartment. And Rhode Island is currently one of 2 New England states whose laws allow landlords to refuse individuals whose rent is paid through a public subsidy. This practice is wrong and it's discriminatory. This legislation won't end discriminatory rental practices or biases, but having our leaders take a firm public stance against this form of discrimination sends an important message. I am so grateful to you for holding this hearing. I'm grateful to you for taking my testimony, and I strongly encourage you to support this legislation. Thank you.
Thank you, Katie. Does anybody have any questions for Katie? Well, thank you, Katie, for sharing your story and how it's been a very positive thing for you and your property. Next, we have Robert Marshall. Is Robert on the line? Is the phone ringing? Robert?
Robert Marshall? Yes.
Robert, maybe you might want to turn down the radio or the TV behind you, but you are...
Just shut it off.
Okay, great. This is the House Municipal Government. You have the floor.
I want to thank the chair and the committee for this opportunity to testify on behalf of the Rhode Island Developmental Disabilities Council. Just wanted to point out a few things. I submitted written testimony, and some of the testimony I have was already covered by other people, so I'm not going to tie up a lot of your time. But for people with intellectual disabilities, a lot more people are now looking after the COVID thing at, whether they want to continue doing congregate or want to really look at living independently. And with people with intellectual disabilities, almost all of them are going to be low income, and the only way they're going to pull this off is with a voucher. And if we're going to continue to allow people to deny vouchers, then you're basically saying that when people run ads like that saying no Section 8, they're basically simultaneously saying no one with an intellectual disability need apply. And I just, we think that that's not the way to go. We think that, it's possible to work this out so it works for landlords, works for everybody else, and especially the people with disabilities that need this support in order to be able to live the quality of life that they want and the safety of life that they want, and not have to live in congregate care just because they can't get an apartment. So we are also willing to work with the committee and the sponsor on language that would help protect the landlords, but I think that they're already pretty protected. I've watched this work in other states, and it's, yes, there are, as with any landlord, you're going to run into some renters that aren't really great, but you can't punish all of the other renters because of that. So we encourage you to take a good look at this and consider it both in terms of the other populations that need this support as well as the population that I represent. Thank you. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Robert. Are there any questions for Robert? No? Thank you very much for sticking up for the intellectual disabled persons. Again, I can understand why they don't want to live in congregate settings with the COVID situation. So thank you again, sir. Okay, next we have Aaron Gardner. Nope, we talked to him. Nope, sorry. Nope, I saw that. Okay, sorry about that. I didn't cross it off. Callie Bobbitt Spears from the Rhode Island Coalition of Domestic Violence, and I've met Callie before, so Callie, welcome, and you have the floor.
Thank you so much, everybody, members of the committee, for supporting this bill. Good evening, everyone, and my name is Callie Bobbitt Spears. I am a member of the community, just like yours. I'm an activist, a mother of 6, and a survivor of domestic violence. I am part of a task force of survivors called SOAR, Sisters Overcoming Abusive Relationships. I am here today urging you all to support House Bill number 5257, legislation to ban discrimination based on source of income. When I was 20 years old, I moved to Rhode Island when I met my now ex-husband. We moved into a house together after we had our first child. In that house, is where the abuse began. Throughout the years that followed, our family grew, and the abuse escalated. He threatened and assaulted me many times. While I wanted to leave, I feared becoming homeless and having to live in a vehicle with my children. I had no support here. We were dependent on his income. I was finally able to seek safety in a local domestic shelter. Because I was low income and most of my income was public assistance, my choices on where to live were really limited. I accepted an apartment with enough rooms for me and my children, but it was not safe. I knew my ex-husband would find me because the apartment complex was very known and it was a small town. And this was the only low-income community there. Because of my source of income, I was forced to make a decision between safety and a roof over me and my children's heads. I applied for Section 8 shortly after moving in, and it took 8 years to receive that voucher. Even with the voucher, many of the options were out of my price range. After a very frustrating search, I finally found an apartment I could afford and was rejected by the landlord for having the voucher. Another landlord knew I had a voucher and told me he preferred to rent to college students. Having a voucher became a barrier, and I felt so nervous telling other landlords I had a voucher for fear of rejection. Other people who also had a voucher told me not to let the landlords know, otherwise my chances of safety in a home would be very slim. Ending discrimination based on source of income would have protected me from being denied a home just because I was receiving public assistance. At the end, I lost that voucher. I could not find someone that would rent to me and my family. I left an abusive relationship to then not be controlled again. I left the abusive relationship to then be controlled and affected by the lack of housing options available to keep me and my children safe. To this day, I will let you guys know that I have 2 jobs. I am a very hardworking individual, and I just needed that little bit of assistance that allows me to afford the rent I have today. While safety is not included in the cost of rent, having a choice where you live is a security that many families fleeing violence need. We must end source of income discrimination. Thank you very much for your consideration and the importance of this legislation.
Thank you, Callie. Is there any questions for Callie? Representative?
Yeah, hello,
Morales?
Callie. I just wanted to thank you very much for sharing that testimony. I know that it is not easy to relive that trauma. And most importantly, you highlighted that this is also a public health issue because there are individuals who, when they are prevented from being able to rent in a livable housing unit, they are then forced to either go homeless, pursue housing in a shelter, or simply go couch surfing because of this. So thank you again just so much for sharing your testimony, because your lived experience matters, and you highlighted it perfectly. This is a social justice issue, this is a racial justice issue, this is an economic justice issue, and most importantly, this is a public health issue as well, especially now during the times of COVID. So just thank you again.
Yes.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for your time.
Yep, Callie, thank you. And again, I've met you down in South Kingstown at the...
Yes.
Yes, and you have beautiful children, too, so it's good to hear from you.
Thank you so much. Yes,
All right.
absolutely.
Thank you again for your testimony. Next, we have Jennifer Hawkins on the line. So, Jennifer?
Yes.
Hi, it's the House Municipal Government and Housing Committee. We are here to listen to your testimony, so you have the floor.
Terrific. Thank you. Members of the committee, thank you for allowing me to speak today on this very important piece of legislation before you. I would also like to thank Representative Williams for championing this issue. This is not the first time you have brought this bill forth, Representative Williams. but I'm very hopeful that this will be the last. My name is Jennifer Hawkins. I'm the Executive Director of One Neighborhood Builders, a community development corporation that works to develop housing and address the root causes of health disparities. Data has shown that housing is healthcare. A person's overall health and well-being is more impacted by where they live than whether they see a doctor regularly. Every person is entitled to a safe, healthy home at a price point that fits their budget. I am calling you knowing that I will go home to a warm and safe house. So will you, and so will everyone else in this room. Unfortunately, we cannot say that same thing for too many people in our community who are sleeping in their cars, couch surfing from place to place, or staying night to night in a motel. The COVID-19 pandemic has highlighted the importance of having a safe, stable place to live, and that those who lack adequate housing are falling behind or being put at risk. When safety measures to prevent the spread of COVID-19 call for isolating, participating in distance learning, or working from home, those without stable housing have limited options. These inequities have very real consequences. The 02909 zip code, which includes Olneyville, Silver Lake, and parts of Federal Hill and Mount Pleasant and Providence, has one of the highest rates of COVID-19 in Rhode Island. Currently, landlords can deny housing applications simply because the applicant uses income sources like Social Security, child support, or Section 8 vouchers. Some landlords use income requirements to exclude voucher holders entirely. In many cases, these income requirements or denial of housing applications are merely a pretext for discrimination for renters of color, women, and people with disabilities who are disproportionately impacted. Rhode Island and New Hampshire are the only New England states that still allow this kind of discrimination to happen. The time to act is now. I implore you to support this legislation. Thank you for listening, and I look forward to seeing it pass unanimously.
Thank you, Jennifer. Are there any questions for Jennifer? No, hearing none. We appreciate your testimony. Next, we have David Valise on the phone. David?
Yes.
Welcome to the House Municipal Government and Housing Committee. You have the floor.
Thank you, Chairwoman, and thank you to the committee. My name is David Valise. I'm the director and lead organizer for the Rhode Island Interfaith Coalition to Reduce Poverty, and I'm lucky and blessed to be here tonight. We want to show our support of House Bill 5257, a bill that would end discrimination based on source of income for people in Rhode Island. I've been working on this bill for a couple of years. I know many people have been working on it a lot longer, and I'm still, every year it doesn't pass. I'm really surprised that it doesn't. This bill is a bill that it makes so much sense, and it doesn't impact anyone in a negative way. It just helps tenants and it helps people in need, and it's really about time that we pass it. And my hope is that we are in a different world. All of us have faced this pandemic, and people have faced so much suffering, that my hope is that we are in a better place to lead with our hearts, lead with our minds, and really finally take a step forward to helping people. So I think this pandemic has shown and highlighted the inequality that exists in our state, in our society. There are people facing housing insecurity and food insecurity like never before. And I just plead with you all to please pass this bill. I think we have a moral imperative to really show up for people that need it. That's pretty much all I have to say. But thank you very much for your time.
Thank you very much, David. Are there any questions for David? No, hearing none. Thank you. We appreciate your testimony. I think next, do we have Christina? Okay. I'm sorry. I think somebody stole the sheet from me. I won't name names. The chair had it. Alex West.
Yes.
Alex, welcome to the House Municipal Government and Housing Committee. You have the floor.
Thanks very much. Good evening. My name is Alex West. I'm with South Coast Fair Housing, and we're a nonprofit fair housing organization. We have offices in Pawtucket as well as New Bedford, Massachusetts. We cover all of Rhode Island. We'd like to thank Representative Williams and the other supporters for bringing this important bill forward. South Coast strongly supports this bill. We have experience enforcing the comparable state law in Massachusetts, which has been in place since 1971. In our work, we see really how these protections help tenants and families increase housing opportunities. I'd like to briefly highlight a research report that South Coast released recently, completed with help from students at Brown. This report is called It's About the Voucher, Source of Income Discrimination in Rhode Island. I've also submitted this report electronically for everybody to take a look. The report presents our research into exactly how much discrimination Rhode Island voucher recipients encounter when they go out and try to find affordable housing. So anecdotally, we know that these tenants experience very high rejection rates, but we wanted to gather additional Rhode Island specific data. So our research had two phases. First, we monitored online rental listings on websites like Craigslist, Facebook Marketplace, apartments.com, and we conducted, secondly, a phone audit of housing providers who had recently advertised units. Upon doing this, ultimately, we found that the combination of cost and discrimination exclude voucher holders from 93% of local housing opportunities. And this is consistent across our state. So tenants with a voucher should have been able to afford more than a third of the units, but they were denied the chance to even submit an application in all but 7% of instances solely because of their source of income. So you can read more about our findings in the full report, but I would say the main takeaway that I would leave the committee with is that income-based discrimination is a widespread problem in Rhode Island. Really, a quick search of advertisements on these popular websites yield numerous current examples of housing listings that explicitly reject voucher holders throughout the state of Rhode Island. And like I said, this issue really affects the entire state. The proposed legislation does not restrict landlords' existing ability to screen tenants based on other lawful factors. So landlords can still confirm like the source, the amount of tenant's income, in order to ensure that he or she can fulfill monthly payment obligations. Many tenants would benefit from the protections in this bill because many still experience discrimination as an obstacle to safe and decent housing. So I'll leave it at that, but I'm happy to field any questions about South Coast research or our work in Massachusetts. Thank you.
Thank you, Alex. Are there any questions for Alex? That's very good information that you brought to the table. I appreciate that, Alex. Thank you. Next, we are going to have Representative Brandon Potter is here, I believe. Did he move? Oh, I couldn't see over there. To testify. Representative Potter.
Thank you, Madam Vice Chair and Chairman Hull and members of the committee. I know we've heard a lot of very powerful testimony so far tonight, so I'll do my best not to be redundant, but I'm hoping that I can offer a unique perspective of my personal experience that would show just why this issue is so personally important to me. As it was mentioned before, I think it's worth noting that just last week the Providence City Council had passed an ordinance that's virtually identical to this piece of legislation. And at the end of last year, the Cranston City Council had also passed a very similar ordinance that unfortunately was then vetoed by outgoing Mayor Alan Fung in his last act of office. Unfortunately, the City Council was not able to then muster the votes to override that veto. And the rationale for that is they do not believe that local municipal governments have the authority to enforce this law. So for my city of Cranston, they're looking at us at the state level to put this into practice. When that ordinance was up, I offered my public testimony for it, and I thought it was only proper for me to also offer that to my new House colleagues and share a little bit about my personal story and my upbringing. So I was raised by a single mother who was a registered nurse, and when I was very young, my mother was permanently disabled and thus applied for a Section 8 voucher. She very much struggled for a long time to make ends meet. and finally was able to be approved for a voucher and received it right as I was going into my junior year of high school. So at that time, she presented it to our landlord, and he refused to accept it. And it had nothing to do with my mother being a bad tenant. She was a great tenant. She always paid the rent on time. She was very clean. She kept me quiet, which might come as a surprise to many of you. It was certainly just the stigma of somebody getting government assistance that was enough to effectively have my landlord at the time make a decision to force me to move. And unfortunately, my mother was not able to find another apartment to rent in the same school district. And she was only able to find another place to rent because it happened to be owned by somebody who was related to us through marriage. And it was in a different town. It was in Johnston. So at that point, I remember being so naive that I asked my mother if she could pass on taking that voucher so we would be able to stay there and I'd be able to finish high school at Cranston West. And of course, she wasn't able to do that, and we moved. But rather than me change high school right in the middle of it, I dropped out, and I ended up getting a homeschooling program. And I'll admit to you at the time, that didn't really seem all that problematic to me. But in hindsight, when I look back at it, it's really hard not to recognize that that was very disruptive for me in my formative years. But I don't share that story with you to press upon you how it affected me, as much as I would ask you to recognize how it didn't affect me. Because somehow, even with that disruption at that time in my life, I was still able to find myself in enough opportunities through life where I've been elected as a state representative and I have the opportunity to testify here before all of my new colleagues in my first act of public testimony on any bill, on this particular bill. And I would suggest to you that that is not a matter of my personal perseverance or anything that I accomplished. It's something that I recognize is a matter of white privilege and the opportunities that I was given that a lot of other people don't have. I would just say that the very fact that I am here testifying is a testament to white male privilege. And I'm not too proud to admit that. Because at the heart of what the current law allows, written as is for landlords to discriminate against poor people. And when we talk about poor people, we cannot have that conversation without acknowledging that the conditions of poverty disproportionately affect people of color. And a lot of the people that are affected by that don't have the same privilege that I've had that has allowed me to be here. So when we talk about the broader context of systemic racism and how we address it, I believe we would be very wise to recognize it's not just an issue in our criminal justice system. It's an issue in all of our systems. And policies and actions by our state government on issues like this are at the heart of how we correct those inequities. Because the ability for people to discriminate against people under the law is exactly what propagates that inequity. And that can't be minimized or overlooked. And especially now when, as Representative Morales had mentioned, the time of COVID, it is all the more important that we protect people's housing security. Because, again, for a lot of people, housing insecurity has very real, very lasting consequences. So I ask every member of this committee to please vote for this legislation, to please support it. I would humbly ask that this is quickly brought to a point to be considered. And I ask all of my colleagues, and I will ask all of our colleagues, to support this when it inevitably makes its way onto the floor. So thank you all, members of the committee, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Representative Potter. Does anybody have any questions for the rep? No. Thank you again for your testimony.
Thank you.
Next, I believe we have David Salvatore on the phone from the Rhode Island Association of Realtors. Mr. Salvatore? Mr. Salvatore?
Hi, Chair. Can you hear me?
I can. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Chair and members of the committee. David Salvatore, representing the Rhode Island Association of Realtors. It's good to be before this committee again. I want to let the committee know that the Rhode Island Association of Realtors has supported this bill for the last 4 years. And I won't belabor a lot of the points that have already been made. They've been wonderful points. But I did want to address one of the questions and concerns relative to what a landlord's rights are and his or her responsibilities around screening an applicant. There's nothing in the bill that would prohibit a landlord from doing their due diligence and screening an applicant. We, I think as an association, recognize that if we're going to create a pathway to home ownership, it starts by creating safe, sustainable, and affordable housing options to those folks who want to rent or own a home. And in terms of the housing voucher that we're discussing here tonight, yes, it should be recognized as a lawful source of income. And if we've learned anything throughout the pandemic, the pandemic has shined a light on a lot of vulnerabilities in industries, not only across Rhode Island, but across the United States. But for those landlords who do or who have accepted Section 8 housing vouchers under the federal program and recognize it as a lawful source of income, they've gone unscathed, for the lack of a better term. And I say that because something that hasn't been mentioned here tonight, but the housing voucher program is all but guaranteed rent. And many landlords do not have to chase that monthly payment because that rent is paid for by the respective housing agency on time. So again, we remain fully supportive of this bill. We've worked closely with Rhode Island Housing, Housing Works RI, and the Housing Network of Rhode Island and other stakeholders to improve access to housing. And look, we've always recognized the importance of creating those safe spaces for people to live. Many of these tenants who do participate in the housing voucher program, many of them don't want to. Many of them don't want to for the rest of their lives. They do aspire to be homeowners. And we have plenty of realtors in Rhode Island who are ready to step up and assist folks in buying their first home. But again, it starts with having access to a safe and sustainable place to live. So for the reasons that I mentioned, we continue to support the bill, and we will continue to work with all stakeholders so that folks do have accessible housing in Rhode Island. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Salvatore. Is there any questions for David? No, hearing none. Thank you again for your testimony. Next, we will go to Hannah Stern from the ACLU. Hannah? Is Hannah Stern on the line? Bear with us as we try to get people on the line. Hannah?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Yes, you have the floor.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Madam Chair and members of the committee. My name is Hannah Stern on behalf of the ACLU of Rhode Island. I'll be very brief, but I just wanted to express the ACLU's very strong support for this piece of legislation, and also that we're really appreciative of Chairwoman Williams' advocacy on this issue. Ultimately, the financial qualification of a tenant should not be based on the source of their rent money and whether it comes from a private employer or from a subsidy program. And what this legislation rightfully would ensure is that no one is placed in a position where they can actually be discriminated against for this reason during their search for healthy and stable housing. So we're very glad to see such an important bill before this committee today. We urge its swift passage, and thank you again for your time. I'd be happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much, Hannah. Are there any questions for Hannah? No, hearing none. Thank you again for your testimony. Next, we have a Liz Katz from the Economic Progress Institute on the line. Liz? Liz?
Nope, this is not Liz.
Oh, who is this?
This is Paula McFarland.
Oh, okay, Paula McFarland, you're a little ways down the list, but you're on the line, so please go right ahead.
All right, thank you very much, Madam Chair.
You're from North Providence Housing, too, I just want to mention.
Excuse me?
You're from it says North Providence Housing. Are you North Providence or Pawtucket Housing?
No, I'm Pawtucket Housing.
Oh, okay. Let me just change that. Okay, go right ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm actually not only the Executive Director for the Pawtucket Housing Authority, I am also the Legislative Liaison for the Public Housing Association of Rhode Island. So on behalf of FARI and its members of all the public housing authorities in Rhode Island, including Rhode Island Housing, who has a voucher program as well, I'm here to speak in support of Representative Williams' hard travel course to get us to this House Bill 5257 tonight. And the co-sponsors, I want to thank them sincerely on behalf of fair housing and prohibiting discrimination in housing against those persons who have a lawful source of income. Here in the city of Pawtucket, as well as across the state, and even more so, as many people have talked about, is the pandemic. And I don't want to go through all the testimony that's been heard. They've all shared so much. But I just wanted to touch on the points that families continue to struggle in the state of Rhode Island, and especially in the city of Pawtucket. The median income in Pawtucket, as well as the rental market, is substantially high. And across the state of Rhode Island, an average two-bedroom apartment is almost $1,400 a month for a family to rent. And unless you make more than $50,000 or $65,000 a year, you're going to be unable to afford most rent in most communities. The source of income bill has been passed by the town of Barrington, and then Barrington can find a way to do this, and the city of Providence will be shortly, hopefully, passing their source of income bill as well. If our local communities can find a way for this to happen, I know at the state level, this hard travel pass that we have been working on for several years can obviously pass in the state of Rhode Island. And once we're successful with that, landlords have every right to continue vetting their clients as they best, or their residents as best as they want to. Here at the Housing Authority, we make sure that we provide, home visits. We make sure that we vet our residents before they become part of our voucher program or our public housing as well. We make sure that background checks and those home visits are done, and we also make sure that we go through a standard vetting process for all of our tenants. So we make sure that all of this happens and that 70% of the funds automatically go to the landlord every single month. So based upon all of that, I would love to see us pass this bill shortly so that no longer we have to see in newspapers where they say no pets, no smoking, Section 8 unavailable, and no Section 8 wanted. So hopefully people will no longer have to live on the streets or live in tent communities or couch surf or, not have a safe place to call home, a decent, safe, and affordable place to call home in our state. And the discrimination will not happen no matter what your lawful source of income is, whether you're 62 and you are on Social Security, or you're a single mom or a single dad looking for an affordable place to live. And if there's any questions that I can answer this evening, I will limit my testimony to that, and I thank you for giving me this opportunity to speak to you this evening.
Well, thank you very much, Paula. We appreciate your testimony. Are there any other questions for Paula? Seeing none, we will move on now to Christiana Fox. Is she on the line? Christiana?
Yes, this is Christina.
Yeah, Christina, hi, how are you? This is the House Municipal Government and Housing Committee. You have the floor.
Excellent, thank you. Hello.
Hello. Go right ahead.
Oh, I'm so sorry. There was a little bit of a delay. I had to mute my screen. But hello, my name is Cristina Contreras-Fox. My pronouns are she, her, and Aya, and I am the Senior Policy Analyst for the Rhode Island Coalition for the Homeless. Thank you very much, Madam Vice Chair, for the opportunity to speak to the committee today. So the Coalition for the Homeless offers our strong support to Representative Williams' bill prohibiting discrimination in housing against those persons who have a lawful source of income. As many people have stated, this is a simple poisonous concept. Tenants are judged solely on how they will be paying rent. These are people who can afford the apartment in question. They have legal, steady income, but the landlord doesn't like the source of that lawful income. And this is perfectly, so they can choose not to rent to them. This is perfectly legal discrimination that literally traps people in homelessness. It presents a barrier that no amount of work or self-advocacy can overcome. And I'd like to share a story with you from Karina Gutierrez, who is a call center agent in the state's coordinated entry system hotline, which is now managed by the Rhode Island Coalition for the Homeless. And I'm going to read her story verbatim. I had a client who initially sought diversion assistance. He had just started a new job, so he had stable income. He just hadn't had a chance to save up the first month's security. I was confused why he called back if he had already been approved for it, when he explained that every time he mentioned that he was getting assistance, the landlords immediately denied him. It never mattered what type of rapport he had built with them prior to that. I don't know if he has been able to find anything since then, but I did follow up with him a month later when I found some more housing search resources, and he still hadn't been able to find anything. Now, when you consider that a renter in Rhode Island must earn, on average, over $60,000 a year to afford a two-bedroom apartment at fair market rate without cost burden, transitioning from homelessness to housing is virtually impossible without federal or state income support. 51% of all individuals and 35% of all families experiencing homelessness have zero annual income. Excuse me. So it is so important that we remove this barrier. And as many folks have said, it can take years for a household to receive such a subsidy, such a support. And as many folks have spoken to very powerfully, many of these subsidies do have a built-in expiration date. If an individual or family does not find an apartment, meaning they don't find a landlord willing to accept their voucher or their other type of income support, they risk losing their subsidy. And as we've heard, once you lose it, it can take years to get it again. Now, a legal source of income can take many forms: Social Security benefit programs, alimony, the Rhode Island Crime Victim Compensation Program, child support, VASH, which is a supportive housing voucher specifically for our veterans. And in the midst of this pandemic, when thousands of Rhode Islanders have lost their job, they're relying on other sources of income to pay for housing and other basic needs. We believe that Rhode Islanders deserve to be considered based on their qualifications as a tenant, not discriminated against by their legal source of income. Their money's green. It says legal for all debts, public and private. They're using it to be able to put a roof over their and their families' heads, and that should just be allowed. On any given night, 1,104 Rhode Islanders will experience homelessness. Even now, when there is a foot of snow on the ground and temperatures regularly drop below freezing, there are still people who are outside in cars because they do not have a safe, secure place to call home. SOI discrimination puts the wrong kind of roof over their heads. Any step taken to remove barriers to housing is the right thing to do. Thank you very much for your consideration, and the Coalition for the Homeless urges the committee to send this bill to the House floor with strong recommendation of passage. Thank you very much, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Christina. Any questions for Christina? No, hearing none. Again, we thank you for your testimony. Next, we have no problem. Thank you. Next, we have Representative Travis Escobar. He's calling in. Travis?
Hello?
Hi. Welcome.
Hi. Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much, Madam Chairwoman, and
First time testifying in front of this new committee, which I'm so excited to establish and be a part of. Testimony has been great thus far in support of this legislation, so I won't take up too much of the committee's time. But again, I'm Travis Escobar. I'm the project manager of public policy over at the United Way of Rhode Island, and we are in strong support of House Bill 5257 by Representative Anastasia Williams. Also very thankful for Representative Anastasia Williams for her long-term advocacy on this issue, and I think as Chairman Hall stated, she had a great fiery testimony and support, and this is the year. This is the year to get this legislation passed. Today is National 211 Day, and for those who may not know, for United Way of Rhode Island, 211 is our 24-hour information and referral line where we connect a lot of individuals to services during this past election, how to vote. But one of our largest needs has been housing-related needs and requests for utility assistance. And it's really the calls and the needs that we hear from Rhode Islanders, especially highlighted during this pandemic, is why we are in strong support of legislation that not only prohibits discrimination in housing against persons who have lawful source of income, but also expanding our affordable housing in this state. We have been long support of this legislation at United Way of Rhode Island, and we're hopeful that, again, this is the year that we can get this done. So I want to thank you all for committee for hearing testimony, and happy to answer any questions.
Are there any questions for Mr. Escobar? Nope, hearing none. Thank you, Travis, for your testimony and the fine work you do over at United Way. Appreciate you calling in.
Thank you so much.
Okay, and next we have the General Treasurer, Seth Magaziner, who is going to, oh, he's on the phone? Okay. Seth, welcome to the Municipal Government and Housing Committee. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I will be brief. I am calling in to express my strong support for this legislation. I want to thank Chair Williams for sponsoring this bill for so many years and for her leadership. As Treasurer, my mission is to promote financial stability for all Rhode Island families, and safe, affordable housing is a pillar of any family's financial security. The lack of affordable housing opportunities affects thousands of Rhode Islanders and disproportionately impacts Rhode Islanders of color, perpetuating an ongoing racial wealth gap that must be addressed. This legislation will help to correct these inequities by ensuring that Rhode Islanders cannot be discriminated against in housing due to their source of legal income. And I know that the experts have already presented a very compelling case tonight, so I won't repeat it all, but one piece of research that I find especially compelling is the analysis by South Coast Fair Housing, which shows that while renters with a voucher could afford about 1/3 of the apartments listed for rent in Rhode Island, they were shut out of 93% of available units due to source of income discrimination. So I urge the committee to support this legislation. I thank Chair Williams and all of the co-sponsors for advancing this legislation. Let's make this the year that we get it done. Let's bring our state in line with most other New England states, some of whom have had this policy for decades, to give families access to the opportunity for stable, affordable housing, regardless of their source of legal income. And I thank you for your consideration.
Thank you, Treasurer Magaziner. Are there any questions for the Treasurer? No? Hearing none. Thank you again for calling in. We appreciate your testimony.
Thank you, Chair. Have a good night.
Yes, you too. I think that's all of our call-ins, correct? And so just to, there's a lot of people who wrote in on this bill. And so Dr. Denise Gleckman is pro the bill. Sean Donahue from Rhode Island Blue Cross is pro the bill. Attorney General Nerona is also pro the bill. Katie West, Elisa Franklin, Adam Williams, John Dunnigan from the Cranston City Council. A lot of paper up here. Bear with me. Tony Simon, Stephanie Geller from Kids Count, pro the bill. Maureen Margaret, Tiffany Word, Gabe Manaroff from the Opportunities for People with written testimony. Michael Evora from the Rhode Island Human Rights Commission. Kelsey Rilo from the Rhode Island Fair Housing Practices. And also from the North Providence Housing Authority. We have from William Malloy, the Executive Director, who's also pro the bill. I think I've covered pretty much, Susan Atchinson from National Organization of Women. Colin Penny from Habitat for Humanity is pro the bill. Karen Malcolm's pro. Isabel Chin is pro. Carrie Long. Nishimi Kramer, Rhode Island Housing is pro the bill. And Andy Wheeler from Providence Human Relations is also pro the bill. And I think that covers everybody. So with that...
before we close out, Vice Chair.
Yes?
I asked for Representative Morgan to come back so that she could answer the question. Did we have a response back? Just so you know, we do not cut anybody off in this committee. She is welcome to come back to give her testimony or get an answer from Representative Williams at any time. So I did ask for her, and everyone's welcome to speak here in this committee and to give your views, whether pro or con. With that, we will close out. Representative Morales.
Yeah, thank you again, Mr. Chairman. Before we close, I just wanted to thank Representative Williams again for continuously introducing this bill. For too long, the working people in our state have been denied and discriminated against rentable living units due to their source of income. And just as someone who was raised by a single mom who depended on a housing voucher alongside the low wages she earned at her minimum wage job, this bill is going to have a direct impact on the lives of thousands of people, especially as we continue to experience an affordable housing crisis. So just wanted to say thank you again publicly, Chairwoman, for being able to do this and pushing this issue forward.